I've played a lot of games in my life. Some are museum-worthy masterpieces, some are good, some are just fine, some are on the mountain of mediocrity, and others wind up here, in the awful archives, like the subject of today's video. Daemon Summoner was developed by Atomic Planet Entertainment and published by Midas Interactive Entertainment. Released on the PlayStation 2 and seemingly only in Europe and Australia in March of 2006. So this game came out after the release of the Xbox 360 and about 8 months before the Wii and the PlayStation 3. It also had a PC version which for some reason has a different title, being called Chronicles of a Vampire Hunter. The opening is presented as a diary entry, with a narration from James Farrington, the protagonist of this story, and I'm just gonna let him explain it.
They killed my son David, tortured and destroyed him as we helplessly watched. But his fate was almost a mercy compared to the way they violated my poor wife, Emily. When they had finished their sickening games, they wouldn't even grant her the release of death. Instead, they changed her, turning her into one of them, a foul perversion of life, an unliving vampire. I hunt them now because they took everything from me. They destroyed my entire life. I have become a dark shadow, hunting the foul blood-sucking fiends through the night. They have always found a way to elude me, but now I finally have a chance to finish it. Tonight, my Emily, my family, will finally rest together in peace.
To its credit, it does show a little transition of Emily turning from human to vampire, and I think that's a nice little detail to include. The rest of the opening being James just talking directly to the camera though is probably a lot funnier than it really should be, because he's just chomping on that cigar the entire time. Also, I don't know why, but the fact that the sentence "an unliving vampire" is ended with an exclamation point in the diary kinda just makes that so much funnier to me than it realistically should be. That now brings us to the main menu, and it's an extremely bare-bones main menu. Just new game, load game, and an options menu that doesn't really have many options in it. The game also doesn't have subtitles, so I hope you can understand what James is saying, not that the audio mixing of the game will help very much. Admittedly, audio mixing isn't exactly my strongest point either. Also, I hope you like this main menu music, because outside of the piano music that was playing over the opening narration and the closing narration, it's the only piece of music in the game. Fun fact, if you YouTube search Daemon Summoner PS2 OST, you'll find the title theme and the soundtrack for Summoner, a PS2 launch title that I own, but I've never actually played now that I think about it. But if you don't specify the PS2, you get some of the Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner game soundtracks, which honestly are way better because 1, Atlus typically doesn't miss in that department, and 2, you know, they have more than one track for the entire game. Starting up the game properly, we're greeted with another diary entry. We'll get one of these for each level, and I'm just gonna let the narration for each of them handle it.
The 9th of November, 1888. I finally tracked Emily back to London, where it seemed she had started to prey on the streetwalkers of Whitechapel. 4 had already died before this day at the hands of the mysterious Jack the Ripper, an imagined identity created by the dregs that inhabit this squalid district of London, and one that Emily was more than happy to hide behind as she hunted her next victim. Damnably, I arrived too late to save the girl, but Emily had lingered too long and I took her by surprise as she was leaving the scene. Strangely, she fled, so I gave chase.
So basically, James has tracked Emily back to London, and the game implies that she's Jack the Ripper. Catching her by surprise after a meal, she flees, and this is where the gameplay starts. And Daemon Summoner is a Victorian set, horror-themed, I'm going to say themed because it's never scary, FPS. You start with a knife and a crossbow. Your ammo count and currently equipped weapon are listed at the top left, your number of lanterns are just beneath it. Lanterns kind of act like your grenades for this game, and your health is represented by the red cross in the top right. Now, the first thing you might notice about the crossbow is that it almost looks like a toy. The bit on the top making it look like one of those ones you might have as a kid that shoots arrows that has suction cups on it. But no, the arrow is below it, and that's actually the scope for if you want to zoom in for whatever reason. There's never a section in the game that would need you to snipe enemies, but it's there if you want it. It also locks you in place while you're scoped in. Giving chase, you run through a side street which leads into the sewer. This is where you first see the ghouls. Basic zombie-style enemies, and you'll be seeing these guys very frequently for most of the game. As you would expect, they try to claw and bite at close range, and as soon as you get into your first encounters, you'll notice something about the combat. It's not very good. You have a knife for close range that's violently unresponsive a lot of the time, and won't hit something even if it's right in front of you, with little to no feedback if you actually are hitting something. And then there's the crossbow. Yeah, it can take off the ghouls' heads, but that won't always kill them outright. And the sound is just so weak and unimpactful. I'm no weapons expert, but I don't think crossbows sound like that. Again, it sounds like a toy. The sewers themselves are full of ghouls, and it's set up in a vaguely maze-like structure, but it's not too difficult to navigate around. Emily is supposed to be running through here as well, and I imagine that the intention is for you to stay somewhat close and follow her to find your way through. During my playthrough this happened because she got stuck running into a wall. I tried to see if I could do damage to her or push her out of the way and get back on track, but no, she was just stuck there. Eventually you find your way back out the sewer and continue to follow Emily until she jumps up onto a building and escapes. Taking the next street, you're then ambushed by two vampires. The vampires will be the second recurring enemy type for the entire game. You fight the two of them in a rather closed off area that doesn't have an indicator, so if you're making a bit too much distance from them, you get a cutscene of Emily jumping off the building and running off into the night. This causes you to fail the level and have to restart. The vampires themselves, despite, being vampires, don't actually seem to bite, and they're extremely easy to dodge. They're not that fast, and to attack they'll actually stop running, stand up straight and do a punch. It's a bit of a weird comparison, but it's almost like how the zombies can't hit you in Nacta and Toten on Call of Duty World at War without stopping to take the swing. Defeat the vampires and run back the way you came down another previously blocked street after Emily. This time she jumps you in an alley and you fight her. She has a bite attack that locks you in place a bit, but she goes down in just a few hits. The level ends with her getting a kick in and running away into the night, with the narration saying that using some arcane apparatus, you manage to track her to the docks.
Once there, I observed my prey as she met with her sire, the vampire Kindness. Before boarding an aging steamship that was part
The objective of this level is to board a steamship, and this is a stealth level. You also now have a revolver that the game immediately says, "Do not be seen or attack anyone as the alarm will be raised and you will never get on board the ship." So you get the gun in an FPS and are immediately told that you'll fail if you shoot it. What you need to do is get into the warehouse, move through the warehouse onto the roof and lower yourself down onto the ship. However, there's no checkpoint, so you need to do this entire stealth level perfectly, or you're going right back to the start. Also, despite the fact that there's a vampire looking directly at the warehouse, apparently that one can't see you sneaking in. Basically, what you want to do here is stay low and use the shadows, use corners and gaps between boxes as cover, but since you don't have a map or any form of indicator on where the enemies are, it's kind of a bit of a pain. Also, I don't know if the game bugged out here or what, but some of the vampires just started running out towards the boat, giving me a clean path to the stairs. Once you're up the stairs and onto the walkways, you need to pay attention to the vampires' walk cycles to sneak past them. You need to sneak pretty close to one of them as it approaches the centre, and then make a left. Then make another left and don't get too close to the two vampires and just wait for the one that's walking straight forward. This vampire would 100% actually see you, but somehow it doesn't, and then just wait for it to turn and go towards the centre before making a break for the stairs towards the roof. Also, don't walk too close to the edge of the walkway or you might clip through onto a box and softlock yourself like I did here. On the roof, once again sneak past the vampires, sticking to the left side wall when their backs are turned, and head on up to the roof. That's level 2 done as you sneak onto the steamship.
The crane's operator had left the rig unattended, so without hesitation, I crossed its boom before dropping down to the deck of the boat below.
But what happens if you fail this stealth level? I'm just gonna let the animation for it play out because I don't think you would believe me if I told you.
As quietly as I could, I entered the warehouse. I hid in one of the crates and was unloaded with the rest of the cargo, eventually coming to rest in some dark storeroom. On exploring my surroundings, I found myself to be in the ruins of a large monastery on a secluded island. By this point,
You start the level in another series of narrow corridors, with rooms off to the sides that often have coffins in them. Some open, some closed, but none of them have anything in them, so it's best to just move on. You'll also find vampires down here. Just like the ones in the first level, they're comically easy to dodge around, because they still need to stop in order to attack. Following a hole in the wall it leads to, that's right, more narrow corridors with vampires. It winds around for a bit, leading to a room with a coffin in the middle and a set of stairs on each side. There's nothing in this room, so just take the stairs on the right and make your way outside. Climbing out of the mausoleum, you find yourself in the monastery's graveyard, which means more ghouls, and there's quite a few of them. I wish I could say you can line them up and take multiple out with a single crossbow bolt, but I can't. So I give the revolver a try, and nope, still can't. And while I do appreciate the low recoil, even the revolver sounds kind of weak. The cemetery also has random grates here and there like a sewer drain, and they seem a little bit out of place. A bit further through you get to a burning part of the ruined monastery, and for the first time in the game I actually find an ammo pickup. There's no sound cue for it, it just tells you that you now have more ammo, but I appreciate being able to find some. Arriving at the entrance to the monastery itself, there's some vampires being attacked by ghouls, so obviously you have to kill all of them. And this is where another problem appears. The gun apparently just doesn't do anything to the vampires. It's giving no indication that they're getting hit, no hit sound effect, no blood particle effect, so I have to slowly knife my way through them. Entering the monastery, you get enemy type number 3, these little imp creatures. They're fast and small, making them a bit of an annoyance to hit, but just like with seemingly everything else in this game, they have to stop to hit you. After this, you have to climb the bell tower. There's a couple of little branching paths as you ascend the bell tower, but these lead nowhere and have nothing, so they're a complete waste of time. Reaching the top of the tower, you find the vampire Kainos. The one who turned Emily into a vampire just stood at a desk, supposedly reading something.
I found Kainos casually working in the tower of the monastery, but Emily was nowhere to be seen. Whatever he was examining was apparently far too consuming for him to take any notice of my highly audible passage through the monastery. That, or he simply didn't care. Either way, once he realized I had made it to his sanctum, it was clear he was going to acknowledge me now.
But he quickly makes an escape, clearly not holding anything, and there's nothing on the desk. As you descend the tower, the game gives you the objective to defeat Kainos. The game tries to present this as a boss fight, but realistically all it is fighting another one of the basic vampires, only it gives him a visible health bar. He'll pop up, do a little kick, run off, and disappear, and then he'll be back on full health when he reappears. He also got stuck on a wall and became invincible while I was playing. So after winning the boss fight you lose because Kainos has a twin who just kinda pushes you over.
I was shocked when I discovered that my most hated enemy had a twin. They were centuries old and had been searching half their lifetime for a way to open a portal in the monastery's catacombs, in an act that would release some kind of demon upon the world. It seemed that in my quest for revenge, I had unearthed an even greater threat to this world. I had to stop them.
Also, we're about halfway through the game at this point.
Apparently, Emily was nothing more than a pet to my captors. She was driven insane when they murdered our son and violated her. So when they finally turned her into one of their own, the sickness in her head was multiplied 1,000 times. They decided to give me to her as a plaything. A humiliating end, they felt, for me to be killed by all that was left of my beloved wife. Once again I found myself aboard that dreadful ship, on my way back to London. I spent most of the journey unconscious in the hold, and awoke to find myself being held in some sort of asylum. I knew I had to find a way out. Luckily, my guards' incompetence was second only to their evil, and I was able to free myself. They only left me with a lantern, so I could see the remains of the other victims, but it served well enough as a weapon until I was able to find something more effective.
Okay, so right off the bat here, I do get a good laugh out of the line, "My guard's incompetence was second only to their evil." But okay, level 4, and now we're finally introduced to the lanterns as a weapon. You'll never need them, but hey, you have them now. Basically just beeline past the additional rooms and up the stairs. There's nothing in any of these rooms aside from one box that you can climb over into the wall and softlock for game with. Upstairs you hear the spirit of Igby, someone who assumably died in this asylum.
Careful, boss.
And then once you find the key, a door is broken down, introducing you to the next new enemy type, the werewolves. Basically, just grab the key, run up the stairs, through a door and along, and you drop into a cell block. Make a right and grab the key. One door in the cell block is highlighted, and inside you'll find Igby's skeleton, who asks you to take his bones with you to free his spirit. Conveniently enough, directly across from here there's some silver bullets to help you fight the werewolves, and all of your weapons along with 3 more lanterns. You also find a second revolver to dual wield, but this is a giant lie. The gun in the left hand can shoot, but it doesn't do any damage to anything and still takes ammo when you need to reload it. The werewolf guard got stuck on this thing on the floor, so I was free to just shoot it to death effortlessly. Then just find the stairs, go back up to the top floor and go through another previously locked door. Make your way through and you'll find Emily. She'll immediately attack you, but just shoot her a few times and she dies, burning to ash in the morning sun as you now leave the asylum. Now with the goal of returning to the island to stop Cainus and his brother, now named Ranius, who would be starting their ritual soon, with only one slight issue. We don't know where the island is, so back to the docks we go.
It was the most horrific thing I had ever seen, but as the fire consumed her body, I knew that at last my dear Emily was free. However, even as the burn was lifted, I knew that Cainus and his brother Ranius would be starting their ritual soon. At this point, however, I still didn't know where the monastery was. Once I managed to escape the asylum, I made my way back to the warehouse that the vampires had been using to store their supplies. I needed to search their shipping offices for any information regarding the location of the island. I had no idea how long I had left before they completed their ritual, so I couldn't afford to take any time.
Back at the docks, we mercifully don't have to worry about this being another horrible stealth level. There's a few vampires around to start the level, so as standard we just run backwards stabbing them. Then we get more narrow corridors and vampires as we move through the building. Reaching the top, we find a ton of crossbow ammo, some pistol ammo, and I randomly just take damage from nowhere. Also important to note that it leaves the second gun that's visibly on the table, because again, the dual wielding doesn't work. Fortunately, you aren't having to sneak around this time, so you can just kill the vampires. Making it to the roof, the stairs are now broken, but fortunately there's a new hole in the wall to go through. Go in and you get ambushed by 2 werewolves, the game saying that they're werewolf mercenaries hired by the vampires. One new staircase later, we find another vampire, run around in a circle stabbing this one for a little bit of variety, and we hit a switch to open up a secret room, in which we find a map to the island. And the island is apparently several days away. At this point you get jumped by 2 vampires, 2 more on your way out of the room, 1 more after that in the next room after that, and 1 final one as you make your way back to the roof for a grand total of 6. As it turns out, I'd actually gone the wrong way, but this worked in my favour because all of the other vampires ran out onto the railing on the upper level, allowing me to just kind of sit there and kill them with the crossbow for free. With those vampires dead, I find 3 more and run to where the first docks level ended, just running in a circle, looping and stabbing them until they eventually die, before making my way to the ladder to end off level 5.
20th November, 1888. I arrived at the island in the middle of the night, still with no idea what stage the twins were at in their ritual. I knew it was taking place in an ancient catacombs, and that it would obviously be well protected by the vampire's minions. But making my way down there at all was going to prove more difficult than I thought.
Back at the island monastery, we start at the entrance to the main building and have to make our way to the catacombs. Basically, this is level 3 in reverse. Going through the ruins of the monastery, initially it's all just ghouls until you reach this doorway, which has some arcade game enemy placement because you get jumped by a werewolf as soon as you step through. And the werewolves, like most other enemies, have a biting move that clamps them onto you for a ton of damage. As you make your way through the graveyard section, the visibility seems to gradually get worse as well. Getting back to the mausoleum we came out of last time, the room with the coffin in now has a ton of ghouls. This is the one time in the game that I found the lantern to be genuinely useful, because there's like 8 or 9 of them all pretty much stood directly on top of each other. After that, it's back through the narrow corridors, now with the imps. I'm pretty sure that some of these imps aren't even textured. Arriving back at the hole in the wall, you're told to defeat the catacomb guards. They aren't a boss or anything, just 3 basic vampire enemies, so run in a circle and stab them. A bit further in, there's 4 more, so just run them back here and do it again. Kill them, and make your way to the door to the catacombs.
With the catacombs guardians defeated, I ventured deeper into the heathen complex. By the time I entered the main chamber, I was too late. The ritual was over, and the portal was opening before my eyes. The twins seemed to have succeeded, and it was now up to me alone to finish this.
The catacombs are the final stage. Walk around to the massive central chamber, and now with the exits blocked by fire, you have a fight with the main vampires, Cainus and Ranius. And despite being brothers, they never coordinate their attacks or anything. As with everything else in the game, just let them get close and then run backwards, shooting, and you'll eventually win. After a while, I assume it's caused by doing enough damage, the brothers will spawn in some imps to fight with them. Although I learned that you shouldn't throw lanterns at the imps because they're very fast, and if you throw one at the floor, it'll instantly do 80 to 90% of your health bar and damage. After killing the vampire brothers, the demon itself will emerge from the center of the room. This is the final boss. The demon alternates between walking around very slowly to do a melee attack, and teleporting to the edge of the room to fire a projectile. The final boss is the only enemy in the game that has a ranged attack, and it splits far enough apart that you're probably never going to get hit by it. Shoot the demon enough, it falls down and is pulled back down through the ground in the center of the room. Then you get the final narration.
My vengeance was satiated, and the world was safe. I'd thought about trying to find my life again, returning to an ordinary job and socializing with ordinary people. But all I have known for 9 years is my war against evil. After the horrors I have seen, I cannot simply return to an ordinary living. There is still darkness out there, and there always will be. I may be one man, but I can make a difference. These creatures stole my life from me, so I will return the gesture in kind. I will become a reaper of the damned, and if they should manage to kill me in my crusade, then I can die knowing my family is waiting for me in peace.
I hope you liked the title screen music, because that's what you get for the credits as well. And that's Daemon Summoner. No collectibles, no unlockables, no bonus modes or replay value whatsoever. Visually, it's not great. There's 7 levels and 4 of them are the same 2 places. Everywhere looks bland, with the combo of grey and brown being the 2 most prevalent colours. While it makes sense for a lot of the settings of the game, it's just miserably boring to look at. When people use "it looks like a PS2 game" as a critique of the visuals for modern releases, I think people must genuinely think every game on the PS2 looked like this. There's only 4 weapons in the game, 5 if you want to include the dual-wield pistols that don't work properly as a separate weapon. You get the lanterns about halfway through the game, and there's never really much need for them. They don't go very far, and since every enemy attacks at melee distance, they have way too much splash damage to really be worth using. Both the crossbow and the revolver feel weak and unimpactful, and in an FPS, if the weapons feel bad, I feel like that's not a great sign. Although I will give credit on one thing, the vampires do seem to die in one hit to the heart from the crossbow, at least when the hit detection decides it wants to work with you that day. There's 4 enemy types: the ghouls, the base vampires, the imps, and the werewolves, and there's almost never any variation for any of them. Every enemy of each type looks the same, with the exception of the red imps in the final stage, and named characters like Emily, Kainis, and Ranius. But even then, fighting them is basically the same, just run backwards and stab them. Or shoot them. Every fight is shoot the ghouls, imps, and werewolves, and stab or crossbow the vampires, usually while running backwards or in a circle. The enemies don't even seem consistent in how much damage they can take, hit detection is a joke, and the gun just outright doesn't seem to work on the vampires. And then you have the demon itself, which is miserably disappointing as a final boss, because it's basically the same thing, only now you periodically have to deal with a projectile that realistically, unless you're standing still, you're probably never gonna get hit by. There's not too many ammo pickups throughout the game, but I never found ammo to be all that much of an issue. You always have more than enough to get through a stage pretty comfortably. Similarly, I don't think this game has health pickups or any actual way to restore your health. If you take damage, you're living with it to the end of the level, or dying in the process. Fortunately, as previously mentioned, it's very easy to avoid most damage, so the lack of health pickups isn't really that big of a deal. As far as the sound goes, it's very generic, almost just stock zombie groans, werewolf howls, and rain to add to the ambience. The music on the opening narration is just a very generic piano track, which is then reused for the ending narration, and then there's no music in the game at all to speak of beyond the title screen, until you get to the credits, and then it's just the title screen music again. The voice acting, what little of it there is anyway, honestly seems kind of okay for the character and what they're going for, but it isn't exactly notable. This also isn't helped by the game's extremely questionable audio mixing. Some sound effects and ambient noises are louder than most of the dialogue, which makes it hard to hear at some points, and with no subtitles, that's a major issue. Admittedly, audio mixing isn't something that I'm particularly good at. I will throw my hands up and admit, this is someone in a glass house starting to throw stones, but it's not ideal. While I was doing a little bit of research to add to this, I did come across an old article from Eurogamer, where they'd talk to someone who'd worked on the game, and that shed some more light onto why Daemon Summoner is the way it is. Apparently the whole thing was made in about 3 months, which does explain a lot. It's more of a prototype than a fully finished game. There's definitely ideas here, but due to assumably budget restrictions and extreme time limitations, it couldn't be realised to what the developers would have wanted to make. The game is bad. Even worse, it's boring. There's no way around that. But at the same time, I do think it's kind of impressive for the timescale in which it was made. In that regard, I'd look at it almost how I look at Devil May Cry 2. Undeniably bad, but definitely had potential. After the release of Daemon Summoner, Atomic Planet Entertainment continued to exist for a few more years, mostly making licensed games before going defunct in 2009. UK Companies House lists it as being fully dissolved in 2013. Midas Interactive Entertainment continued for another few years, the last game I can find their listing on being Card Shark, a game from 2010. And according to UK Companies House again, Midas Interactive Entertainment was dissolved in February of 2024. Some of the people who worked on Daemon Summoner still work in the industry. Some of them have been working on Project Zomboid. While I haven't played it myself, it generally seems pretty well received. As of the time of me writing this, the game has 94% positive reviews on Steam, and honestly, I wish them the best. But that just about closes the book on Daemon Summoner. Given the time frame it was made in, I think it's impressive that it isn't worse, but it's still one of the worst games I've played, and it's more than earned its spot in the awful archives. Thanks for watching. I'll have a full playthrough of Daemon Summoner in the description and in the end card, and as always, feel free to leave a comment or click any of the buttons down below if you feel so inclined, and I'll hopefully see you all later for whatever it is I do next. Okay, thanks for watching. Later.